This is the Policy and Taxation Group supporters call and the Family Enterprise USA members call. The panelists are here in video and you can hear them. You as participants are all muted and you do not have video. The only way you'll be able to communicate with us is through the Q&A. And please, if you have questions of the speakers, give those questions in the Q&A. I will be attempting to monitor that. And if we have time, we will ask questions after each speaker. If we don't have time, we may have to answer those questions at the end. The call is being recorded, and for those of you who support the work of Policy and Taxation Group and Family Enterprise USA, you will receive a link with that recording and a summary of the call. If you are not currently a supporter of either organization, I really encourage you to go online and become a member or a supporter and contribute to our work, which is so important. As another reminder, Family Enterprise USA is a 501c3 and Policy and Taxation Group is a 501c4. And for all of you tax accountants on the phone, you know that's an important distinction. So I am going to start with just briefly going through the agenda. I've done my welcome. I'm going to then introduce Mike Lunsford, who's going to introduce Congressman Arrington, who's on the phone, as well as Mason Champion, his legislative assistant. Then Frank is going to talk to us about the American public opinion in the age of social justice, COVID-19, and the struggling economy. Then Russ Sullivan will talk to us about the Trump platform, and Brandon Ramon will follow up with the Biden platform. So I am now going to turn it over to Michael Lunsford, who is a board member of Policy and Taxation Group, a good friend to both organizations, and was kind enough to introduce us to Congressman Arrington and Mason Champion. And so he will make that introduction. Michael?
Well, Pat, thank you very much. I'm glad to be with you all today. Technology is a wonderful thing. We're able to connect in ways we never believed would be possible before. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce to everyone on this Zoom meeting Congressman Jody Arrington. Jody is one of what I would describe as the rising stars of Texas politics, and we've had a lot of rising stars in Texas over the years, in fact, over the decades, as many of you know. And Jody Arrington is right there at the top of that group. And in January of 2017, Jody became only the 5th representative to serve the 19th District of Texas in the U.S. House of Representatives since its creation in 1935. And in Congress, Jody is an outspoken advocate for significantly cutting government spending, ensuring a strong national defense, and protecting the freedoms we all deserve. He has been a proven voice for conservative values and is a leader amongst his colleagues. In the 115th Congress, Jody was a member of the Agriculture, Budget, and Veterans Affairs Committees. And he was also appointed by the Speaker as the only freshman to serve on the Joint Select Committee on Budget and Appropriations Reform. In his first term, Jody played a pivotal role in restoring cotton to the Farm Belt safety net, providing historic tax relief, tax reform and regulatory relief, and making the largest investment in rebuilding the military over a decade. Now let me go back to cotton for a moment, because cotton is the #1 export of the state of Texas. And cotton is important to the world, and it's certainly important to the Texas economy, and it's important to the United States trade deficit. And upon entering the 116th Congress, Jody was selected to serve on the Committee on Ways and Means. And as a new member on Ways and Means, he's prioritizing rural America's most critical issues: agriculture, energy, and healthcare. And on healthcare, even though it's not mentioned, I think, in the particular bio that I was provided, but Jody was the president of an organization that was pioneering telemedicine. And where would we be in this day and age, in this time of this pandemic, without the telemedicine? And what a future vision that he had for that particular ability to reach patients, to reach doctors. And Jody is a driving force, and he will be there to ensure West Texas agriculture and energy producers continue to feed, fuel, and clothe the American people. And Jody is fortunate that he has a tremendous wife in Ann and 3 children that are willing to make the sacrifice and support of him so he can serve in Congress on behalf of the people of the 19th District in the state of Texas. And so, Jody, thank you very much for being with us and for being a champion for us on this estate tax issue. Without you, we wouldn't be here today. So thank you very much, sir.
I'm against all un-American tax proposals. That's my first principle. Defend the Constitution and oppose all double taxing provisions and anything that is un-American. There's nothing more un-American than somebody that's worked their entire life or their lives and paid taxes every step of the way, built their wealth and handed their legacy. In my case, in West Texas, it's a farm or a ranch. And then their kids, sadly enough, have to liquidate, sell that and just to pay the taxes. It's unacceptable, and that's an easy one for me. So Michael, thanks for the Texas-sized introduction, very generous. And that's what we do for each other in Texas, because bragging is a sport there. But my mom said it's not bragging if it's true, and I hope most of what you said is true. I can tell you something that's true is Frank Luntz is about as good at knowing the pulse in this country and the public sentiment of where we are and where people would like us to go, sort of as a nation and in particular as a Republican Party. So I appreciate his friendship and I appreciate his counsel. He's recently briefed the Ways and Means Committee, and it was again very insightful, and it helps inform us as we lead up to what is the most consequential election of our lifetime. And you know, it seems like, Frank, people say that just about every presidential election, but the stakes just got higher, my friend. And I'm just going to speak very broadly about where we are and some of the things that we're looking at from a Ways and Means perspective, given that I'm talking to tax policy experts. The first thing, though, let me say, is in this next COVID-related legislation, and it's probably maybe there's another one, but I think it's going to be the last large comprehensive COVID-related legislation. I hope we don't need another one because I hope the economy is getting traction. That's going to depend more on reopening than it is on any government stimulus or relief provision that we have in a COVID legislative package. So the key for me is, first and foremost, where do we need more temporary and targeted relief for families and frontline workers? Because that has to be our priority. It has to be. Secondly, Texas is reopening. Like most states that reopen, you're going to see flare-ups, you're going to see spikes. And I think from my vantage point, Texas is managing it well. And I think that on the heels of the July 4th and the protest, and there are a number of things that I think we should expect the numbers to change, but I expect them to come down over the next couple of few weeks. But again, my sort of perspective is that there's much greater long-term devastation to the economy and social and even public health adverse impact if we don't begin to reopen and if we don't lean into getting folks back into the workplace, into the marketplace, kids to school. It's just going to be far worse. And you can never replace with some government program paying customers for these folks who are just really in survival mode. The PPP program worked well. There's still hang-ups that we're working on the forgiveness component, but I give the president and the administration great marks for taking this Herculean effort to provide the lifeline of liquidity through the banking system. By the way, there are lots of good stories that have come out of COVID, like in our own personal crises. We've learned that we have to restructure the supply chain for the sake of public safety and national security. We've seen the free enterprise system work in the most nimble and innovative way to expand capacity in ways the government could have on testing, PPE, and other critical supplies. And telemedicine was mentioned. I did help launch a telemedicine company, and leveraging technology in ways that we could have been doing 2 decades ago, but there were government barriers. So we're knocking down barriers, cutting through red tape, deregulating, and even putting pro-growth provisions in place to rev the economic recovery. All these things, many of these things are positive, not just for now, but for the long-term future for the country. So reopen, number one, can't replace paying customers with a government program, and you certainly can't do it forever. It's not sustainable. Secondly, let's remove the barriers. Let's just do the common sense things that most Americans, not just in West Texas, but any part of the country, are thinking, and that is, don't pay people more to be on unemployment than on the payrolls. 75% of the people in my district who are on unemployment, 75% of them are being paid more than they did in their previous job. That has to expire. We can put provisions in place and guardrails against paying somebody more and still shore up the safety net and still provide relief, especially targeted to those people who need it the most. But we cannot allow for this $600 plus up on unemployment insurance to persist. There are other barriers. Legal liability would be the next big one. I won't go through the rest of the list, but that's a cloud that hangs over the confidence that we need in the marketplace in terms of recovery. And then with tax policies, you know, we've seen that the cleanest and leanest ways often to stimulate, to provide relief temporarily, stimulate the economy for this recovery is through tax policy. $600 billion in liquidity in the first couple of rounds of COVID combined. And that's net operating loss carrybacks, that's deductibility on interest, and a number of other provisions. Now, the question is, what do we still need in place from a temporary targeted standpoint? Healthy workplace tax credits, employee retention tax credits, and a list of things that just make sense in the near term. And then if we can, and these are the opportunities in times like this, let's put in more free market pro-growth policies like full and immediate expensing. There is nothing more pro-growth than making that expensing provision 100% immediate and permanent. Same thing with R&D. We've got a number of other provisions that we're considering too. Retirement savings, and I've got a list in front of me, and if you guys have questions, I'm glad to answer them as best I can. The state tax is an easy one. I mentioned that. Let me make one last comment, and then I'll open it up if y'all have quick questions, or y'all can move on to your celebrity presenter today in Frank Luntz. But I can tell you, when I ran for this position, I made very clear that my greatest concern long-term for this country was a sovereign debt crisis, was the trajectory, the debt trajectory we were on. And it's gotten worse since I've gotten here. And that seems to be the story I hear from retiring members of Congress who I often, Michael Lunsford, I interview folks like Joe Barton and Jeb Hensarling on their way out. I want to listen and I want to learn and I want to glean the wisdom from these guys and what they could have done better, would have done, and should have done if they had this opportunity again. And to a person, and invariably, there's a great, you can see the countenance change, and there's great displeasure with the fact that they were not able to do anything about the debt. And I don't know when it goes south permanently, the dominoes fall and we become grease. I don't think anybody knows, but when they fall, you can't get them back. We can't bail ourselves out of it. You can't print money. can't borrow money. And it will marginalize this country and I don't have to go into all the details because you know it. But rather than to just talk about it every year, like I hear most legislators on both sides, I took the information I gathered and the relationships I made during the super committee, where Paul Ryan was kind enough to appoint me as the only freshman on that appropriations and budget process reform super committee. And I took that and I started this. We don't even have a name for it. It's a caucus, I guess. I call it 30 for 30, like the old ESPN deal, because we have 30 Democrats, 30 Republicans. I handpicked the Republicans. I had one person turn me down. We've got every major caucus. We've got RSC chairman. We've got the Freedom Caucus, chair of Tuesday Group. You've got on the Democrat side, progressive Democrats, new Democrats, Blue Dog Democrats, and Scott Peters from San Diego and I have worked very diligently since the first big CARES, since the CARES Act and the $3 trillion that we appropriated for this, where we're seeing now, the highest. We had more deficit spending in the month of June than all of last year. And now we'll have a debt that surpasses World War II for the first time as a debt compared to the size of our economy, which is the real metric here. So we worked together. We came up with 3 policy neutral process reforms that would force us as members of Congress to deal with this problem and begin to put responsible policies for the right outcomes in place. And I won't go into them, but I would say it was no small thing to have 30 Democrats and Republicans sign off, send it to their respective leadership. I spoke to the vice president on our GOP conference call, and I just almost begged him, please make sure that when we pass the next big COVID, that we put a provision in there that will stave off the longer term biggest crisis that would be a disaster for our country. We already have bipartisan provisions and initiatives and reforms. We're not recreating the wheel. Let's just have the will to include that. Let's do right by our children. That's all, folks. I'll take questions if you have them. Otherwise, Patricia, thanks for letting me share just a little bit of my thoughts and insights as a Ways and Means member leading into this next COVID. I didn't even talk about the civil unrest and the things that my folks in West Texas want to talk about the most, but I'm sure Frank's going to give you a lot more on that in his presentation.
Well, thank you very much, Congressman Arrington, and thank you so much for sponsoring H.R. 5652, which is the rate reduction bill in the House, reduces the rate from 40% to that of capital gains for gift estate and generation skipping tax, which is so important, and we struggled to get that introduced. So thanks to you and Michael Lunsford, it's now in the House, and we are working very hard to get co-sponsors. Mason has been wonderful in all of his follow-up, and Brandon's put so many meetings together. We've done over 30 Zoom calls now with members and staff members. So thanks so much for your support. I will just tell the audience that I'd like to move on in the interest of time. If you have a question, again, put it in the Q&A, and we can address those later. Congressman Arrington, if you need to drop off the call, I really, really appreciate you coming. I know you've got a very busy schedule, so feel free to do so.
My honor. God bless everybody. And Michael, go Texas.
Yes, sir. All right, go Texas. Thanks, Jody. You're a great friend.
Frank, good to see you, brother.
I've always thought Oklahoma has got one up on Texas, so I'll wait till you're not there.
I didn't even talk about my annexation bill to bring Oklahoma into Texas. That'll be for our next Ways and Means Policy Hour. See you guys.
Thanks again.
Hi, Jody.
Appreciate it.
Good seeing you.
So as the Congressman said, Frank Luntz needs no introduction, but to remind everybody on this call, Frank has been working with us since 1998, helping us develop our message, helping us to understand the voters' needs and what they think about, what they care about. And he is really the word doctor and the master of voters' attitudes and how to communicate with voters. So Frank, I'm going to turn it over to you. It looks like you're already sharing your slides. And his topic, I mean, I will say it for you, American public opinion in the age of social justice. COVID-19 and the struggling economy. It's all yours.
And you're not gonna, I'm really sorry to present this because it's going to upset a lot of people. I don't know if the congressman is still on because I can't see, but it is, the numbers are getting worse and worse. The numbers for Donald Trump, he can say all he wants about it being fake news and phony. Every survey shows him slipping. Every survey shows public support for his positions on the economy, on COVID, on the protests have been dropping. It's, we have the potential, and I think this is why you wanted me on. I'm the wake-up call. So Jody is very much about what we could be doing now, and I'm about what is happening, what is actually occurring right now. And there is a distinct chance that the Democrats, and I know this is a nonpartisan, non-political organization, and I respect that. I do want you to understand the consequences if the Democrats win the presidency, win the House, and win the Senate. And the very first thing they will do, number one, is they will repeal the tax cuts that were passed a couple of years ago. And they will do it within the first 100 days, and it will become law. And so I'm going to walk you through some of the things that we are finding, and I will do the same thing. I won't do questions. Pat, I'll do this in 10 minutes, and then we'll open it up to questions, and you'll just stop me when we hit the 10-minute mark. I'm actually checking my timing right now. To show you how bad it is for Donald Trump, we are doing language testing and actually applying his name to a philosophy, to the conservative philosophy, is very popular among conservatives, but very unpopular overall. And the issue right now, the challenge right now, are those swing voters. These are people who I've always targeted. The individuals that don't vote Republican, don't vote Democrat, they go back and forth. They're swing voters in two ways. Number one, they will vote for Republicans and Democrats in the same election. And number two, they're not even sure that they're going to vote. What is happening right now is that we're going to have the highest voter turnout in decades. Everyone is going to vote. In Chicago, they're going to vote 2 or 3 times. If you have any dead relatives, I suggest you go to Chicago on election day. You're going to have the chance to see them because they're going to participate many, many times. Everybody wants to vote. Everybody wants to participate. You're going to have a high voter turnout among 18 to 29-year-olds who are voting Democrat over Republican by 7-3, which is a huge margin. You're going to have a high turnout among African-American Latino voters. African-Americans are voting Democrat over Republican by 92-8. Latino voters, it's about 2-1, maybe 3-2. And then you're going to have a high turnout among Trump voters. I assure you that in rural areas and places like where the congressman lives, they are going to participate. But there's going to be no turnout differential. Everybody is voting. And second, is that Trump now has 50% of Americans who have a strongly negative opinion of him. That has never happened in American politics before, since the age of polling. So you have to go back to 1936. And that makes it very hard for him to come back. You have a convention speech, which will be important, and you have got 3 debates, which are going to be crucial. But I want you to see where the public stands right now. And I want you to also understand that it is not about his policies and it is not about his record. It is about the last 90 days, about how he's handled COVID, how he's handled the protest, and primarily it's about his language. That these people who are undecided, and it represents only 6% of the country, they're undecided simply because they do not like what he says as opposed to what he's done. And so it is changeable. It is still repairable. The election is not over yet. But he is so gosh darn determined to say it his way, and it's really pissing people off. And here's an example. He is seen as not having any plan for COVID, as just responding to the way things are right now, no matter what he says about having a wonderful experience handling this virus and how great he's done. That is not what the public sees, and they want a plan of action, and he's not giving them what they want. And I'm going to have a chance to make a presentation to probably the two most important people other than the president himself. But this has got to change, and I don't see it as changing. And there's nothing, for those of you who know me for a while, and by the way, since I've last seen you, you'll notice, and I can feel it as this presentation goes on. You're my fourth Zoom call of the day. I've got 2 more coming up. And I had a stroke in January, and it does affect my speaking. So my F's and my S's sometimes come across blurred, but the message is not blurred at all. There are things that he can say to make a difference. Some of you on this call are donors to his campaign. Some of you I know prefer Joe Biden, but I will tell you exactly what they want. They want a science-based decisions. They do not want politics as part of it. They want health and safety first, and individual freedom and local control second. This is the language that he could be using on his defining what he's trying to do. But this, you'll say this doesn't sound like him at all, and no, it doesn't. And that's one of the reasons why he's had problems in what he's doing. Now, I would do this as a vote, but it's too difficult. And I can only see 5 of you on this call. So I won't take a vote. All you have to do is look at language on the right, and you'll recognize that those are the words that are being used by the White House. And the language on the left are the words of the American people. They do not want warriors. They don't see themselves as warriors. They see themselves as hardworking taxpayers. By the way, I will say that, Michael, you're the first person ever to get up and walk around during a Zoom call I've ever done. I guess that's what they do in Texas. It's
No, thank you. No, it's because something was boiling over.
Yes, it's the American people and their attitude towards what's going on in Washington. You realize if you keep drinking so much, you're going to have to get up and use the facilities, and we're all going to check and see if you wash your hands. You're going to be seen by 63 people to see what you do when you come back. Dominate the streets. I don't understand what it is about this president that he loves to use that word dominate. Energy dominance was his phrase. It was the worst on energy, and it's the worst. We want safe and secure streets, law and order. Ask the public what law and order means to them, and they see police hitting people over the head with clubs. What they want is public safety. He is not wrong, and I'll repeat that, and I'll do it in a positive way. He is correct for a majority of the public in what he wants to do, but he is dead wrong, absolutely wrong in how he's communicating it. Economic growth, some of you heard me say that. By 3-2, they would prefer a healthy economy. Economic growth is what the people who follow the stock market want. Economic growth is what Wall Street wants. A healthy economy is what we want. And one more point, since we talked about COVID, slow the testing down. He's trying to get testing money pulled from the Senate legislation. It's the number one thing that the American people want in terms of a COVID response, number one. And yet he's calling to zero it out because he thinks it makes him look bad. Pat, there's nothing I can do about this if the president is so off and so insane about what he says. And it's just so frustrating. And just very quickly, because I know I'm going to run over my time. And I'll just take 3 of these. Number 1, Republicans and Democrats agree on nothing. And for anyone here who's voting for Joe Biden, I apologize if this comes across as partisan, because it's just no way to bring Republicans and Democrats together. You can bring Democrats and independents together. You can bring Republicans and independents together, but there's so few issues other than infrastructure that unite the two parties. Second, income inequality, social inequality. And I say that to this organization because this is the reason why I do believe that if it's a Democratic House, Democratic Senate, and Democratic President, income inequality is going to be addressed immediately. And I don't even think that you're in the position right now that it's just going to be about repeal. Pat, you and your members have to start to prepare for an idea that they're going to go after you. And I'm going to skip ahead because I want you to see the legislation. And then I'll stop and take questions. This is what the Democrats see right now. Take a look at Clinton voters. 88% think the rich don't pay their fair taxes, that makes them angrier than the poor getting benefits they don't deserve. These are the people who are going to run the country if the Senate goes Democratic. And even among Republicans, it's split 50-50. We asked the question about whether you support a top rate of 1%, that the top rate for the top 1% goes to 70%, where it's now at, 37, 38%. 62% of Americans support it, 79% of Democratic voters support it. And one more for you. It goes off the screen. If you guys see it the way I see it, where the face is on the right-hand side and the chart is on the left-hand side, add it up together. Over 70% of Americans support a 2% tax on those who have more than 10 million in assets, which every person on this call has. This is shit. I mean, it really is. Our country has changed. And I will go back to one more slide to explain how that change has come. And I just want you to know, I've got language for all of this, but I do have a request, a potential request. If people believe that opportunity does not exist or that opportunity is unequal and they don't have a fair shot, then they will absolutely vote to oppose you. And that is what has happened, not just in the last 3 months, but in the last 30 days. Those George Floyd protests brought home to Americans that we are not, or seemingly not, a fair country. And we have seen a sea change in public opinion, which will upset the congressman. I don't think he's still on. But the problem with the legislation right now, quite frankly, is that the American people support spending it all. That there is no concern about the debt. There is no concern about rising taxes because the public does not think they will suffer through it, and they do not think they will pay it. It will be paid by people on this call. Mm-hmm. As much as I was negative about where we were 100 days ago, it is beyond frightened. Like, I'm trying actually, and this will sound horrible, I'm trying mentally to accept what is going to happen, because I think we've reached our peak as a country. I think we've reached our peak as a society. There's no concern about the debt, and just tax anyone who's got the money, confiscate it. That is what is being preached on the streets of America today, and an increasing number of Americans are following it. So, Pat, I'm going to give it back to you. Maybe you don't want to take questions because it is so negative. But, and Pat did not see this before I presented it. I presented it cold for her, but she's always allowed me to present the truth to you. I've never painted a fake or phony picture. I've always sought to give you what is really happening out there. And if the Democrats take control of the Senate, you have seen our future in the presentation I gave you right now. So, Pat?
Yes, so thank you so much, Frank. And what I would say is we don't have any questions in the Q&A. I'm not sure if people just are uncomfortable using it or we have a problem, but I have some questions for you,
Okay.
as I usually do. And that is, of course, we want you to present exactly the real world. And that's what we count on you for, Frank, and you've done it here. And it's very important to us to focus on that. It is, obvious that there may very well be a wealth tax. And so my question to you is, how do we as family business owners who are perceived as wealthy get legislators and, more importantly, voters to understand that a family business may be wealth, but it's not liquid? And while there are hedge funds that are very liquid and could pay and support a wealth tax, family businesses, and there may be one on this call right now, like the White Castle family, as you know very well, they can't liquidate their, hamburger stands to pay a wealth tax. We have not done a good job in communicating that message. And so we need your help doing that. So do you have a suggestion for us? I mean, we can talk about this offline, but.
Yes, I do have a suggestion for you. And the first suggestion is to do what you can to keep a few people, more people in office on the Senate side who are not going to add a wealth tax under any circumstance. Of all the things I can do, that is the most important thing. In the end, if Democrats have a 51-49 or even 50-50 balance, they will add a wealth tax. They will repeal the death tax. They will add the taxation. They will repeal the cut in the death tax, and they will add to taxation, guaranteed. There's no doubt about it. So the first thing to do is keep those people in office and actually participate. And if you don't participate, then you've got no one else but yourself to blame, because you're investing a few $1,000s to have an impact that will probably mean millions of dollars to you all. Second is that we've talked about this before. You have to participate. I'm working on CEOs right now to start shooting films of themselves, talking about the challenges they've overcome, talking about the support that they've given to their employees and their people, to personalize it with these stories. But Pat, if your people aren't willing to go on air, aren't willing to be part of a social media campaign that says not only are these good people, but they help society in good and decent ways, if they're not willing to defend themselves, how can we defend them?
Yeah.
And if you will not do this, if you will insist on staying hidden, then they're going to come after you, and you can hide on this call and you can sit out the election campaign. But on January 20th and the next 100 days, they're coming after you. AOC thinks you're evil. They already have taken down Joe Crowley, the number 4 person in the House, the person who would have been Speaker. They took down the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. The chairman. You don't think they'll take you down? They're coming after you directly, and this is a specific way to do that. When you explain what you do and how you do it, it matters. And the policies that they are going to promote are significant. And one more here, which is lifting people out of poverty. Pat, for those people who started a family business, who are either first-generation immigrants or began their lives as working class or poor, those are the stories that need to be told. Because if they can do it, somebody else can do it. You have to create that path to prosperity. That is the language that I use. And you need a half dozen of those people, and I'll help script it. I'll help them say things that will engender respect and support for what they've done and not make them a target. But silence is no longer an option. And these are the things that are critical, and they need to communicate that they value, respect, and appreciate their people. These are the things that we need to be communicating over the next 100 days.
We have a question from David Plimpton, and that is, do you think there is a turnaround event that could tremendously affect the election, like a black swan, and may be pivotal to those elections? Ruth Bader Ginsburg retires, Joe Biden's challenging, speaking, etc.
Yes. It could be Joe Biden's convention speech, could be Donald Trump's convention speech. Those two will be watched by tens of millions of people, those events. In fact, the debates will be probably watched, my guess is, by 40 million people. It could end up being the most watched program of the year. So those debates are pivotal. The ads don't matter as much, and quite frankly, Trump's ads have used the same language that Trump is using, because those are the only ads that he'll approve. So he's actually doing himself harm. If he is seen to win those debates, he can win the presidency, absolutely. And they can change the outcome, because right now you have, again, that 6% of voters are willing to split their tickets. Donald Trump is down by more than 6% in North Carolina, which has a key Senate race. He's down by more than 6% in Colorado, which has a key Senate race. He's down by more than 6% in Maine, That's a key Senate race. Those races will be lost if he loses by more than 6%. And those are 3 races that the Democrats need to win the election. Montana, it's very close up there, and that would be the 4th seat. So if Republicans win in Alabama, which they are expected to do so, then you got to watch Montana. Those are the states that matter most. Those are the states that are truly in play. And right now, Trump is going to cost the Senate, but that's right now. That's on the, whatever today's date is, the 20th of July.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and hopefully everybody understands that. I mean, the game really here is the Senate. If the Senate flips, we will have a whole different world. So this is from Mary Myers Capola. Frank, how can Frank get into the White House and campaign to influence Trump's language? Frank, that's a very interesting question for you.
I have an event Thursday morning, which can make a difference, which I'm not going to say on this call because there are too many people. And I'm doing 2 significant briefings on Wednesday, and I'll put it this way. I have to get COVID tested. So if I'm sick, I'm going to find out Wednesday morning for stuff that I will do Wednesday afternoon. But I will tell you, again, with all embarrassment and all candor, that there's so little that I can do on the presidential because he is what he is. And I've been to the Oval Office. I've had dinner in the president's private dining room. I've been on Air Force One. I've been to Camp David. All the great thrills of a lifetime I've had over the last 2 years. And I would like to say that I earned them, but the truth is I didn't, because he did not listen. And Joe Biden, I will also tell you, as a human being, as a very decent man, I'm just afraid to death of the people he's surrounding himself with. Biden has compassion and caring, which is what the public needs right now. America needs a hug. America needs someone who wraps their arms around them and says, you have the right to be nervous. This COVID thing, no, Texas is not in good shape. California is not in good shape. I'm in Washington, D.C. right now. I'm not going back to California because I'm being told privately that LA is going to shut down in the next couple of days. And I don't want to be there for that. And we have to acknowledge what's really going on. This is not a temporary thing. This virus is hell. And it is impossible to knock out. And and I will show you the language behind that. I want you to see that I prepared this, but you'll notice that Donald Trump isn't using it. You can hear some governors talking about this. You open with 2 rhetorical questions, and it starts with America, but then it goes healthy lives, because that's what Americans prioritize more than anything else, far more than the economy, the health and safety of individuals. Our medical experts have never been trusted more than they are right now. They've got the highest reputational ratings in 50 years. And yet Trump has pushed Dr. Fauci away, pushed Dr. Blix away. He's not surrounding himself with people who the American people trust. And then that last line, resume their lives safely and sensibly. It personalizes it. It's not about the economy. It's about each and every individual. Safely and sensibly is what we want more than anything else. These are the words that work. I don't think I will be successful, but I've developed them, and I will present them to over 40 members in about 2 hours from now.
So, if I might, Pat, one of the things that I don't think people have discussed often enough, and it goes back to what Frank was talking about, if the Democrats have all the levers of power, is the potential for changing Senate rules in order to limit the filibuster. Because the discussions that I've had with sitting members of the Senate and also Republican strategists is that if the Democrats are in control of the Senate as well as the White House and the House, and they can change rules for filibuster, it gives the Democrats an avenue in order to become the forever party. And by adding at least Washington D.C., if not Puerto Rico, as additional states, and They would like to abolish the electoral college as possible, but I don't know enough about the mechanisms of doing that. The point is that it's going to be, losing the Senate will put us all on a path to see draconian measures passed in the Senate going forward. Russ may want to address that, but that's what the discussions I've had.
And I'll add one more to that, which is that the Democrats hate the nominees so much that Trump has put forward that they are considering expanding the court by 2 seats, which
Right.
is also by fiat. It is not by law. So you can easily have an 11-person Supreme Court, and then all that changes. Yes, it really is that significant.
Right.
But I want you to see this polling that we did. The health and safety matters by 2-to-1 over either person's financial situation or that they should be done together. That actually Donald Trump, by trying to open up schools, by trying to force schools to open up, which I support, by the way, but not the way he's doing it, he's scaring the hell out of moms. And if you want to know where the numbers are changing between now and what they were 100 days ago, Trump has lost moms of children in school more than any other group. And it's because they think that he's putting his election ahead of the kids' safety. This is a policy issue. This is not just a communication issue.
Mm-hmm.
And the president should not be doing that. He does not understand. And it is very frustrating. Pat, I'll do one more question, then you'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, I'm actually we got Russ and Brandon yet. So Frank,
Okay.
I'm gonna move on. I thank you so much for your slides. I thank you
Thanks, Frank.
as always for your input and your friendship. And I will stay in touch because I have lots more things that I wanna talk to you about and have questions. So thank you so much for joining. Really appreciate it, and stay well, please.
Thank you.
Russ, I'm now gonna turn it over to you. Will you please, Russ is now sharing his slides. Hopefully everybody can see that. He's with Brownstein, Hyatt, Farber, and Schreck. And Russ is part of the team, as is Brandon, who will speak briefly after Russ speaks. And he's going to talk about the Trump's agenda. So it's now all yours, Russ.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Pat. Now, Frank has set out a scenario, certainly makes it seem likely that the Democrats will win at least the presidency in the fall. But keep in mind, 4 years ago, most Americans would predicted the Democrats were going to sweep the last election, and it did not happen. So it is too early to tell. We want you to know what will happen under both scenarios. So first, we'll take the Trump side. What will President Trump do with respect to taxes, both now and then into next year? Tell me how to move. Okay, so first of all, we've got Trump's current response in his tax proposals. So he's got some proposals on the table in the Senate right now, but also should the coronavirus still be a problem after the election, he's got several things he's pushing. Some are really aimed at industries that have really been hurt, the hospitality industry, restaurants and all. And he's got some proposals to encourage people to get out, to travel, to eat, to do business at restaurants, that kind of thing. If for some reason the vaccines have not been delivered, the strategy so far has been direct funding of those vaccines with contracts with pharmaceutical companies, but he'll work to find other ways with tax incentives if that hasn't happened. He's also strongly trying to figure out how to promote companies to move operations from China to the United States. We might see a little bit of that in the next few weeks, perhaps something more robust during the fall campaign. So what is Trump's proposals regarding individual tax policy? Well, when you're an incumbent president and you win re-election, you don't necessarily have to have a new tax bill your second term. In fact, most presidents have not. Bill Clinton had tax increases in his first term, as well as some tax reductions. He didn't really have a tax agenda the second term. George W. Bush didn't really have a big tax agenda his second term. Now, Ronald Reagan did. He had tax cuts in 81 and then tax reform in 86. So it's possible, but Trump said we might see that this fall. What we do know is what he is for. One, make TCJA permanent. That'd be all those individual provisions that are expected to expire in 2025 to make those permanent. We would see legislation to do that if Trump wins, and particularly if the Republicans take the House.
So
On
Russ,
individ-
your slides are not moving, you know.
Am I on the second slide? Am I
No, you're on the very first one.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so you may want to do a slideshow.
Slides don't move.
Is your tech guy here, there?
Yeah, he's coming back. Okay, I'll continue on while he tries to figure
Yeah.
out getting it on. But we will say also on individual tax rates that, remember, Trump has been for lowering tax rates. He's particularly said the 22% rate perhaps should be lowered to as low as 15%. Are they moving now, Pat?
Yes, they are.
Okay, good. So just press this. All right, so we might see some further reduction, particularly of the middle class for Trump. On capital investments, Trump has signaled some ideas he has here. He's talked about indexing the basis of capital assets for purposes of computing capital gains. They really look to see if they could do this without Congress. It's not clear whether they can or not. It looks like Secretary Mnuchin, at least for now, advised the president not to do it by regulatory authority, but they could come back with legislation in a second term. This proposal could be central in the campaign in the fall, a debate between Biden and Trump. Biden wants to raise capital gains rates, but it also would be an interesting juxtaposition to what Democrats are developing in the Senate. This is not the wealth tax that Frank talked about, but Ron Wyden has a mark-to-market proposal we covered in a previous session that will require annual taxation on the appreciation of tradable assets. With respect to business taxes, President Trump would fight to retain the 21% corporate rate. He, in previous times, has talked about lowering it to 15%, so I guess that's a possibility. He's also going to make sure the 20% deduction for pass-through businesses is made permanent as part of making permanent the individual provisions. I think one of the things Trump has already stepped up to do is to really fight foreign governments on behalf of American businesses, particularly the European countries and the OECD, who are trying to reach and tax more American companies, regardless of their nexus to the particular country, taxing them on their digital presence in those countries. And then finally, there are other Republicans' proposals out there that are not authored by Trump, but he probably would embrace. Talked about TCJA permanency, and the leadership in both chambers for the Republicans are already working to do this. But there's also an innovation agenda. Kevin Brady in the House is really developing a set of proposals to help American businesses. He wants to expand and double the research and development tax credit and other things that will help develop new industries here in the U.S. And finally, there's some savings agenda proposals that Senator Rob Portman of Ohio has developed to promote savings in and outside of our employer-sponsored retirement plans. So not as much change as what you'll see in the next presentation, but still a number of things that Trump might pursue.
Thank you so much, Russ. So we're going to turn it over to Brandon Ramon now with Squire Patton Boggs, again, another important member of our team, and he's going to talk about the Biden platform.
Excellent. Thanks, Pat. And can everybody see my screen?
Not yet. Now we can,
Okay,
but you
great.
probably want to do slideshow.
Yep. Let me just get it up here. So, okay, here we go. And since I know we're short on time, I will go through these fairly quickly, but there, as Russ mentioned, there's quite a significant shift in the current tax policy landscape should Vice President Biden be elected. So first go through the main individual tax proposals. So the first, unlike President Trump, who wants to make permanent the TCJA changes, Vice President Biden will revert the highest income bracket, which are those making $400,000 a year or more, from 37 to 39.6%. Also would have an impact on capital gains, and so he would return capital gains rate to 39.6% on income above $1 million, and he would also eliminate the step up on basis. He would also cap individualized itemized deductions. So those basically with tax brackets over 28% would face limited ability to deduct their itemized expenses. And then also restore the P's limitation on itemized deductions, which effectively reduces the value of your itemized deductions for certain dollar amounts over the $400,000 cap. And then for those people making more than $400,000 a year, they'd also impose an additional 12.4% Social Security payroll tax on that income that is above $400,000. And that would be split between employers and employees. On the corporate side, again, you'll see tax increases. So they'll be raise the current tax rate from 21% to 28%. For those companies that have book profits over $100 million, they would impose an alternative minimum tax style tax that was eliminated. And so it would effectively require you to pay a 15% minimum tax, but still allow for certain NOLs and foreign tax credits. For GILTI is basically the global minimum tax for those companies that have foreign subsidiaries, and it effectively tries to have a tax on intangible income. It would increase the current rate of 10.5% and double it to 21%. You would establish a manufacturing communities tax credit. So for those manufacturing areas that are experiencing layoffs as a result of government closures or other economic impacts, there would be tax credits available to those areas. They would make permanent and expand the new markets tax credit. They would offer tax incentives for retirement savings plans to encourage additional employers to expand their retirement savings offerings. And then also Russ touched upon this, I think, briefly, but there'd be incentivized kind of in this new Green Deal era for energy, renewable energies, and eliminate subsidies and incentives for fossil fuels. Just briefly, I'll just kind of touch upon this, and then I'll wrap it up because I know we're about out of time. But
well, Brendan, we have a few extra minutes, so you know.
Okay, I'll go through this briefly. So this is just a couple other economic development proposals. So the Biden and Sanders campaign formed a quote unity task force, and they've released about a 100-page plan last week, and it included a number of economic proposals. So just kind of highlighting a few of them. So there'd be a public credit reporting agency established within the CFPB, and that'd be used for all lending programs. And then credit reporting agencies would be required to report their data to the agency within the CFPB. There would be a development of more labor standards, unified labor standards for affordable housing, and also trying to take into account the need for the impact on climate change and emissions reductions. There would be a national standard for housing appraisals. The Federal Reserve would be required to do a report on racial employment and wage gaps and what they're doing to address that. They also, within the Federal Reserve, would be establishing a real-time payment system, and also examine the use of using the post office for banking services. There would be, again, they want to expand basically the Volcker rule, which was put into place to separate your retail banking and investment banking. So you look at that and expand it. And then lastly, for those lenders that have what the Democrats say predatory or high interest rates above 36%, they would look at ways to limit that, and then on non-residential consumer lending. So there's a lot of, as you can see, a lot of regulatory kind of shifting of the regulatory landscape away from eliminating these various regulations and being put back into place, some that have been eliminated, and kind of stronger protections from the perspective of the Democrats. So quite a different proposal than we saw as Rush present with the Trump plan. Obviously a really potential to impact the folks on this call, especially on the tax side, and in particular with the capital gains piece. Our legislation would tie the state tax to the rate of capital gains, so it's something to consider in particular as we're moving forward with that. So those are the largest, most important, impactful proposals they have for the folks on this call. So maybe let me pause, Pat, and turn it back to you and see if folks have any questions.
Okay, so I don't see any current questions for either of you. And so in the interest of time, what I would say is, if you do, I'm going to remind everybody on this call that if you support the work of Policy and Taxation Group and Family Enterprise USA, meaning that you fund our work, you will receive this recording and you will receive a summary of the meeting and the presentations. If you do not, you won't. So if you are interested, please go on our websites, policyandtaxationgroup.com or familyenterpriseusa.com, become a member, become a supporter. Please support our work. It's more important than ever. While you may not think much is going on in Washington, D.C., there is a lot going on. And if we don't maintain what the work that we do and continue to fight the fight, we will lose, as we have done for now over 25 years. So appreciate everybody being on the call. Thank you so much to all of you panelists. Thank you, Michael Lunsford, for your support on the board, as well as introducing us to Congressman Arrington. And I hope everybody has a great rest of your day. And once again, thank you all for joining, and for the participants is joining as well. Take care.